I'm not bitter, I'm just honest. If you've ever heard Bret the Hitman Hart speak, you've probably heard that phrase or some variation more than once. Bret will tell you he's just keeping it real, calling it straight, and protecting the sacred art of professional wrestling. But let's be honest here, Bret Hart could complain about a sunset being too orange if it reminded him of Goldberg's tights at Starrcade '99. Don't get it twisted. Bret Hart is one of the all-time greats. The excellence of execution lived up to the name. He was sharp in the ring, technical to a fault, and had a deep respect for the wrestling business that bordered on obsessive. To Bret, wrestling wasn't just a job, it was an art form, something to be revered, protected, and performed with integrity. But Bret's reverence for wrestling also came with a long memory and a heavy grudge-holding gene. If you crossed him, politically, physically, or even in passing, you were likely going to be on the receiving end of his honesty. And by honesty, we mean years and years of subtle shade and not-so-subtle rants in interviews, documentaries, and even his autobiography. Over the decades, a few names have bubbled to the top of Bret's grievance hit list like oil in a Calgary stew. These are the guys he just can't let go of, whether they ended his career, hurt his pride, or represented everything Bret thought was wrong with modern wrestling. Some deserve the heat, some probably don't, but all of them have caught Bret's verbal sharpshooter more times than we can count. So let's step into the ring, tape up the wrists, and count down the top list of wrestlers Bret Hart loves whining about, complete with backstory, quotes, and enough Hart-sourced salt to preserve a side of Alberta beef. This one isn't just a beef, it's a full-on buffet of backstage drama, broken trust, and bitter decades-long resentment. Bret Hart vs. Shawn Michaels isn't just the most iconic real-life rivalry in WWE history, it's the backbone of Bret's post-wrestling personality. At first, Bret and Shawn seemed destined to be the new leaders of WWE's new generation. Both were workhorses, both could sell a match like it was WrestleMania every night, and both had the in-ring credibility to carry a crumbling post-Hogan WWF into the future. But where Bret was serious, straight-laced, and traditional, Shawn was wild, cocky, and surrounded by the infamous clique. Things began to fracture when Shawn started playing games backstage, refusing to return favors or drop titles when he was supposed to. Bret took issue with the way Shawn undermined other wrestlers, acted out in the locker room, and basically became Vince's golden boy. Things came to a head in 1997 with the now legendary Montreal Screwjob, when Vince McMahon, Shawn Michaels, and Earl Hebner conspired to take the WWF title from Bret in his home country without Bret's knowledge or consent. Bret's been reliving that night ever since. He punched Vince McMahon in the face backstage, stormed off to WCW, and then spent the next 2 decades explaining why he was right and Shawn was wrong. Even after their public reconciliation in 2010, Bret still couldn't resist slipping in a few passive-aggressive jabs during interviews. Shawn was a great in-ring performer, but not always a great human being. Michaels, to his credit, has taken the high road in recent years, admitting he was a mess in the 90s. But Bret? He still talks about Shawn like the kid who stole his lunch money and blamed him for it. If you ask Bret who ruined wrestling, HBK is right near the top. If Shawn Michaels hurt Bret emotionally, Goldberg hurt him physically, and possibly permanently. The grudge here is far more raw and painful, both literally and figuratively. The setting: Starrcade 1999. Bret Hart was WCW champion, riding high as the top guy in a company that had no idea how to use him. Enter Goldberg, a physical specimen with the subtlety of a brick through a windshield. During their match, Goldberg delivered a notoriously stiff thrust kick to Bret's head, concussing him so badly it ultimately ended his in-ring career. Bret has never forgiven him. Over the years, he's unloaded on Goldberg in interviews, podcasts, and even Hall of Fame speeches. Bill Goldberg couldn't wrestle a broomstick, he once said. Another classic: he's a gorilla. He was all strength and no finesse. And of course, one of the most dangerous and unprofessional wrestlers I've ever stepped in the ring with. What stings more for Bret is the idea that Goldberg never really apologized. Goldberg has expressed regret in interviews, but Bret doesn't think it's sincere. He believes Goldberg should have reached out, taken more responsibility, or at the very least, acknowledged the damage he did. Goldberg, for his part, has mostly stayed quiet, but that hasn't stopped Bret from going on offense. This isn't just a petty grudge, it's a scar that never healed. Literally. And you can't blame Bret entirely. He lost his livelihood because of one careless move. That kind of bitterness has roots. If Bret Hart had $1 for every time he called Triple H overrated, he'd have more money than the Montreal Screwjob cost Vince in PR damage. Bret's beef with Hunter isn't based on one incident. It's more of a slow burn. To Bret, Triple H represents the rise of corporate wrestling, the politics, the power games, and the style over substance movement that he always loathed. He's accused Hunter of holding others down, benefiting from his relationship with Stephanie McMahon and failing to deliver truly great matches without help. In multiple interviews, Bret's gone out of his way to downplay Triple H's legacy. "I don't think he's ever had a 5-star match," Bret said once. "He's not in the same league as guys like Shawn, Kurt Angle, or even John Cena." Ouch. Triple H has never really responded directly, but you get the sense he's heard the noise. And let's be fair, Hunter did play politics, but he also adapted with the times, put on some classics, and helped reshape WWE behind the scenes. Bret doesn't care. In his eyes, Hunter was always a secondary guy, pushed above his station. If Shawn was the flashy annoyance and Goldberg was the reckless brute, Triple H was the political mastermind, the guy who rose through the ranks not by performance, but by positioning. And Bret's never respected that path to the top. Now this one's spicy. You'd think Bret Hart and Ric Flair would be kindred spirits, both old school guys, champions in multiple territories, and proud flag bearers for technical wrestling. But nope, Bret has never missed a chance to throw a full-on verbal chop at the Nature Boy. The core issue? Bret thinks Flair is overrated and repetitive. He's repeatedly said Ric did the same match every night. Chops, backdrop, bump over the turnbuckle, figure 4, rinse and repeat. Bret's praised Flair's charisma, but slammed his in-ring style as lacking depth and psychology. Ric, of course, didn't take that lying down. He's fired back in his own autobiography and countless interviews. Flair called Bret the most self-centered, miserable guy he ever worked with, and accused him of being jealous. Bret doubled down. "I never thought Ric Flair was a great worker. He was a great showman, but not a great wrestler." He even said his matches with Flair in 1992 were carrying him every night. This feud is less about personal betrayal and more about clashing wrestling philosophies. Bret values realism and technique. Ric values spectacle and character, and both men are too stubborn to give an inch. The result? A decades-long back and forth that makes for gold on the mic and ice in real life. Last but never least, the Hulkster. The man who never passed the torch, at least not to Bret. Bret's issue with Hogan stems from 1993, when Hogan returned to WWF, won the title from Yokozuna at WrestleMania 9, and then vanished. Bret was supposed to be next in line. Vince even teased a match between Hogan and Bret at SummerSlam. But Hogan said, nope, didn't happen. Instead, Hogan dropped the belt back to Yokozuna, and Bret got sidelined. To Bret, that was the ultimate betrayal. Hogan didn't do the honors. He didn't elevate the new generation. He didn't show respect, and Bret never forgot. He's since taken countless shots at Hogan's in-ring skills, backstage politics, and persona. "He's a phony," Bret once said. "He didn't respect the business, only himself." Hogan, in typical Hogan fashion, played it vague. Bret's entitled to his opinion, brother. But Bret's opinion has been firm for 30-plus years. Hogan was the face of the business, but in Bret's eyes, he was also its biggest egomaniac. So, what do we make of all this? Bret Hart is a man of principles, and principled men often carry heavy baggage. To some, Bret's constant critiques come off as petty. To others, he's simply the last of a dying breed, one of the few who still believes wrestling should be more than flash and fame. He believes it should be real, respected, earned. The 5 men on this list, they represent everything Bret loved and hated about wrestling. Shawn Michaels, the perfect rival and polar opposite. Goldberg, the physical reminder of wrestling's dangers. Triple H, the corporate climber who beat the system. Ric Flair, the peacock who prioritized flair over function. And Hulk Hogan, the ultimate icon who never gave back. But maybe there's something comforting in Bret's endless honesty. Love him or roll your eyes at him, Bret Hart's grievances are a reflection of how seriously he took the craft. He never phoned it in, never stopped caring, and never stopped being Bret Hart. Flaws, complaints, and all. In a world of that's just the business, Bret stood firm. He didn't play the game, and he still refuses to let it slide. Some call it whining. He calls it integrity. Well, that's all we've got time for today, and a big thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our future content. See you in the next video.